All right, good morning. It's my great pleasure to introduce Alba Collart, who is a faculty member at Clemson University, and she is an agriculture and food economist. And her work aims to use economic thinking to design sustainable food systems. Within her work, she is covering a range of topics, which is consumer research, food marketing, and policy analysis. And she also works in the area of food waste, and um, there she looks into consumer responses to advertising and labeling. Um, Alba has received a number of awards, and she works as the president of Food Distribution Research Society, and she's promoting actively education and research in this field. And we're very excited to hear your presentation.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction. And good day, everyone. I hope that you're having a great day, regardless of where in the world you are located right now. So today, I'm going to present some work that we're conducting in collaboration with other colleagues here at Clemson, Mississippi State, and North Carolina State University. And we're interested in looking at specialty crop farmers' preferences for contract attributes. Specifically, we're interested in characteristics such as the traceability lot codes and the type of contract, which includes blockchain-based automated smart contracts. So specialty crops are highly perishable, susceptible to foodborne illness outbreaks. The management of specialty crops can be more challenging than other crops, and their production is labor-intensive. So producers, they face peculiar risks when making production and marketing decisions. Not all producers are interested in contracts because there can also be barriers and other risks involved. But one of the main reasons for producers to enter a contract is to have a guaranteed market for the product and therefore market security. So several studies have looked at the contract attributes that producers prefer, but contract attributes that account for new food safety policies, such as the United States Food and Drug Administration's food traceability rule, technological changes, such as blockchain-based smart contracts, and the use of non-traditional payment methods, such as cryptocurrency, have not been examined yet. In terms of food safety risk, we are interested in the food traceability rule, which was issued in November of 2022 to allow for faster identification and rapid removal of potentially contaminated food from the market, resulting in fewer foodborne illnesses and deaths. So essentially, this rule requires those who make, process, pack, or whole food that is on the food traceability list to have a traceability plan and traceability lot codes linked to something called key data elements. Also, given their susceptibility to foodborne illness outbreaks, it is worth noting that most of the crops on the list are specialty crops. Regarding technological changes and the use of non-traditional payment methods, we're interested in blockchain technology, which is the underlying record-keeping system of cryptocurrencies, but also has applications in food traceability and more recently in contracting. So blockchain is an electronic ledger or record-keeping system designed to prevent the manipulation of digital information that is recorded in the system. And here you can see an illustration of how blockchain might be used for food traceability in the food and agricultural industry. So as a product moves through each step in its supply chain, the information can be recorded in a shared blockchain-based system. The data recorded can be, for example, copies of organic certifications. It can be good agricultural practices certifications, lot numbers, information about quality control, transportation, or storage temperatures. A more recent use of blockchain is the development of smart contracts based on blockchain technology. Blockchain systems can also store digital contracts that automatically execute parts of the contract when certain terms or conditions are met. So smart contracts could be used to automate steps of a business transaction, such as verifying expired certifications or releasing payment once a product is delivered. Currently, the food, agriculture and food sector is testing systems that would allow parties to digitally record contract terms, such as the payment amount or the due date, and to specify how those terms will be executed. So the objectives of our study are to examine farmer contract preferences regarding traceability local requirements and whether preferences for these codes depend on the farm already having a traceability system. Also, their preferences regarding the use of blockchain-based digital platforms with automated smart contract capabilities and for traditional written contracts. Preferences for the timing of the payment. And finally, we're interested in looking at their preferences for the payment type and whether the preferences for cryptocurrency depend also on previous experience with cryptocurrency. We started our study in December of 2021 with a small focus group, which was conducted with 4 farmers. We then used the insight that we learned from that focus group to draft our pilot survey, and we then launched our final survey, which concluded in August of 2023. We obtained 55 responses during the pilot and 342 responses during the final survey. Out of those, we had 16 good responses in the pilot and 176 good complete responses in the final launch. So we're defining good complete responses as those who completed the stated choice experiment, they passed our attention check, the survey progress was 100%, and they did not take less than 12 minutes to complete the survey. So that means that they were not responding faster than average. Our target population were small and medium-scale producers of specialty crops in the United States. We conducted a survey that included a stated choice experiment in it, and prior to completing the stated choice experiment, the respondents read a chip talk script. We also collected data on the farm operation characteristics, the farmer characteristics, including their use of contracts and their use of online marketing platforms and other technologies as well. For our experimental design, so for our pilot design, initially we used a multinomial logic D-efficient design with no priors, and we targeted the minimizing the error. And then for our final design, we used a Bayesian D-efficient design with priors that were estimated by calculating a conditional logic using the pilot data. Our experimental design had 30 choices, and we blocked this design. We used 5 blocks, and then each block had 6 choices. Then we randomly assigned respondents to one of the 5 blocks. And then for each of the choice questions, they saw three options. 2 of the options were contract options, and then 1 of them was the status quo. We also included a Likert scale attention check, and to control for ordering effects, then we randomized the choices within each block with the exception of the Likert scale attention check. Here are the attributes and the attribute levels that we used in our experiment. So for the type of contract, it could have been a traditional text-based contract or a digital platform with automated smart contracts. So this means that the platform has blockchain smart contract capabilities. So certain terms, for example, the phone transfers, the delivery notifications, or the verifications of some certifications could be automated. We also had an attribute that referred to the traceability log code, whether this log code was required or not required. We had an attribute looking at the method of payment, and then the levels for that attribute were cash, check, card, or electronic bank transfer, and cryptocurrency such as Bitcoin or Ethereum. We also included the time of the payment, so it could have been an immediate payment upon delivery or delayed payment 30 to 60 days after delivery. And then we had, of course, the price attribute. So in the experiment, we asked respondents for their main crop and the average price that they received for that crop. So in this case, the price attribute refers to the price level that farmers receive relative to the average price per unit that they reported for their main crop. Here's a snapshot of our theoretical framework and econometric model. Random utility theory states that there are deterministic portions and random portions of utility. So we focus on modeling the deterministic portion of utility using the estimating equation that you can see here. We interacted contract with uses contract to look at whether preferences for choosing a contract option in the experiment over choosing the status quo depended on farmers' previous experience with contracts. We also interact trace lot code with trace system to see if the preferences for the contracts requiring the traceability lot codes over those contracts that do not require the codes, depending on whether the farm already has a traceability system in place or not. We also interact crypto with a variable called owns crypto to see if the preferences for the contracts offering the crypto as the payment method over cash, depending on whether the respondent owns or has ever owned cryptocurrencies. The parameters for the variables contract, smart contract, trace lot code, check, crypto, and delay, those were assumed to be random and to follow a normal distribution, and all the other parameters were assumed to be fixed. Finally, we used the mixed logic model estimates to calculate our marginal willingness to pay estimates and marginal willingness to accept, So the marginal willingness to accept would refer to the change in the willingness to accept a contract when a single non-price attribute level of the contract changes. So now onto our results and what we have found so far. In terms of the use of the contracts, we find that around 47% of farmers use contracts and 75% of their produce is sold through contracts by these farmers. So there's also some interest in using contracts. So if we look both at the percentage of farmers who use contracts and those who are interested in doing so, we see that that number is closer to 71% of farmers who either use them or are interested in doing so. In terms of our stated choice experiment results, so we find that on average, farmers prefer the contract options that were offered in the experiment over marketing the product as usual. So we find that even farmers without previous experience with contracts, they prefer to choose a contract option over choosing the status quo in the experiment. Farmers with a traceability system, they were indifferent between a contract that requires lot codes and a contract that doesn't require the lot codes. And then the farmers that didn't have a traceability system, well, their preferences were reversed naturally. However, they would accept a 5.6% price premium for entering a contract, requiring them to assign the codes that uniquely identify the product cases. So what this means is that all else equal, these farmers that do not have a traceability system in place, they would be indifferent between a contract that does not require the traceability lot codes or another contract that requires the traceability lot codes but offers them 5.6% more than the average per unit price they receive for their main crop. Farmers also preferred traditional written contracts over blockchain-based smart contracts, but they would accept a 4.3% price premium for accepting a digital smart contract over a traditional written contract. In terms of the timing of the payment, they prefer immediate payment over delayed payment, naturally, but they would also accept a 10.4% price premium for accepting delayed payment relative to immediate payment. In terms of the payment method, we find that farmers were indifferent between a contract offering cash versus check, card, or an electronic bank transfer. But then we did find some interesting things regarding digital currencies. So farmers preferred cash or checks over digital currencies, and we did find some heterogeneity there. So farmers who do not own or have never owned cryptocurrencies, they would accept a 58.4% price premium for accepting cryptocurrency as the payment method. Now, the farmers who own or have owned cryptocurrencies, they still prefer cash to checks, but we find that they would need a lower price premium of around 26.4% to accept cryptocurrencies. Moreover, we also find that around 63.5% of the farmers indicated that they would have been more likely to choose any of the contract options offering standard cryptocurrency if the method of payment was a central bank digital currency instead. We define the central bank digital currency as a one-to-one digital dollar that would be backed by the United States Federal Reserve. The stakeholders that want to enter contracts with specialty crop farmers, they have to understand farmers' trade-offs when they are contracting. And in this study, we consider new contract attributes that are linked to technological and policy changes. Farmers prefer contracts over the status quo, but the contract terms must also be acceptable. So in this study, we find that farmers would accept price premiums for contracts that require traceability low codes if the farmers do not have a traceability system in place. They would also accept premiums for a digital smart contract over traditional written contracts and for contracts with delayed over immediate payment. So we find in terms of the payment type that farmers are indifferent between cash or check, card, or electronic bank transfers. But their preferences for cryptocurrency over cash were substantial. So we do find a very substantial price premium that would be required. And this required price premium did decrease with experience. So it decreased if the respondents had experience with cryptocurrencies. I will end by highlighting some potential barriers to the adoption of blockchain-based smart contracts and cryptocurrency payments. So we find that around 71% of farmers in our sample use contracts or don't use contracts, but are interested in doing so. Still, there is a portion of farmers who just don't want to engage in contracts. So they have no interest in doing so, perhaps because of their size or the markets, the outlets that they're targeting. Some farmers also do not have good internet connectivity. So we find that around 28% of our samples said that they do not have good internet connectivity, but perhaps more importantly, they may have limited experience with online market platforms or planning software and with digital currency. So as much as 87% of farmers have never used an online market platform, only 24% of farmers, they use enterprise, business, or crop planning software, and only around 27% own or have owned cryptocurrencies before. We also asked farmers about their general views regarding digital currencies, and we find that about 79% of respondents didn't believe that cryptocurrencies play an important role in the current financial system in the United States. So thank you again for your time today. Again, my name is Alba Collart. I am in the Department of Agricultural Sciences at Clemson University, and I welcome your comments or questions.
Thank you, Alba, for the very interesting question. My first question to you is a curiosity. How did you get a hold of the farmers, and how did you make sure they were knowledgeable about blockchains and smart contracts?
Right. So we used, first of all, I would like to highlight a partnership that we had with a nonprofit called Ag Launch in Tennessee. So they work with farmers to help them, adopt technology, basically, in the United States. They have their own network of farmers that, they participated in our pilot study. We also have very close relationships with extension services. So at the time I was at Mississippi State University, and I was an extension professor. So we work very closely with farmers as well. And then finally, there are contact lists that we purchased from several companies. And then regarding the knowledge, we did have a knowledge quiz as part of the survey. So then there are surveys included at the very beginning, just a quiz to know their knowledge, their baseline knowledge. We want to know, what type of knowledge are you coming in with? And then we had an educational component. We explained it. And then we retested that knowledge. So there was another quiz to make sure that that knowledge actually increased.
So was that knowledge basically a screening question? If somebody had no idea at all, that you would exclude them, or were they still able to participate?
Right. So they were able to participate. We did find an increase in knowledge. There were at least five different questions. So I would say that their knowledge increased significantly. And then we decided to collect all the data, and then we can segment also based on their previous knowledge. So we can run more analysis and just look at whether there are differences in our results depending on their level of knowledge.
Another question to you would be of a methodological nature. Why would you not conduct a real choice experiment instead of a hypothetical choice experiment?
Right. So this one, in the case of blockchain-based smart contracts, they are currently being tested, but they do not exist out there in the market. They are not currently actively being used by farmers. But a great thing about hypothetical experiments is that we can create this market. So we decided to conduct a hypothetical choice experiment to sort of create this market and see what farmers' response would be to these hypothetical scenarios.
Are there any questions from the audience? Yes, Michael.
Alba, I'm curious, in your results, you don't show any breakdown by demographic characteristics, educational attainment, size of farms. I'm curious, have you looked at that? Because I would imagine that there would be some pretty stark differences across demographics, farm size, maybe farm value. So I'm curious, if we are to see blockchain and smart contracts types introduced, who are the target farmers and who are more likely to accept it than others?
Thank you so much. That's a great question. So I do have, I stopped sharing my screen, but I do have a slide where I show farmer characteristics. So in general, I would say that in terms of demographic, the demographics reflect maybe what you would find for the average United States farmer. So we do have a sample that has, the majority of white males as the operator of the farm. But we are interested, particularly that finding that heterogeneous finding regarding the premium that will be required for cryptocurrencies. We are interested in looking at that, but segmenting that by the size of the farm, by the age of the operator, and perhaps because we also have data on beginning farmers versus non-beginning farmers, so maybe segmenting our data that way as well.
Yeah, and I would be curious to know whether those correlations are the same. Yeah, I imagine attitudes towards crypto are very different than attitudes toward blockchain and smart contracts. Just because crypto has a whole bunch of issues aside from just fungibility, right? The volatility of holding it and those kinds of things as a quasi money. So I will be, because I expect you will write this up down the road. Interested to see, how these attitudinal differences are reflected across farms, across demographics for both of those technologies separately. And I am also curious if how highly correlated are those willingness to accept at lower premia versus willingness to accept contracts or smart contracting.
Yeah, so for the latter question, I'm not sure, to be honest, at the moment. But like I said, that is definitely in our next steps to look at, just different characteristics. And I agree with you about, separating that the blockchain versus the smart contracts.
Well, if there are no more questions from the audience or from Catherine, then I would like to thank you for a very interesting presentation and your time this afternoon. I'm looking forward to see you in Brazil.
Thank you so much.